The hearse arrived on a Tuesday, shrouded in an almost supernatural mist that seemed to swallow the vehicle whole. Thick fog choked the town square, muffling the engine's rumble and casting an eerie silence over the usually bustling area. It was my job as the town undertaker to receive the body. I had done this countless times, but something felt different that day. Except no one had died, at least no one that I was aware of. The funeral parlour stood empty, waiting for a guest that had never been announced. The driver, a gaunt man with haunted eyes, insisted he had the correct address. His voice trembled slightly, as if he too was unsure of the reality he was presenting. He thrust a sealed envelope at me, the name Jeremiah Thornhill scrawled on the front in spidery handwriting. The ink looked fresh, almost as if it had been written moments before. No Jeremiah Thornhill resided in our quiet town, not that I knew of. I had lived here all my life and knew every soul by name. Curiosity piqued, I opened the envelope with trembling hands, half expecting it to contain some sort of explanation. Inside, a single yellowed photograph fluttered to the ground. It seemed ancient, like it had been plucked from another era. It depicted a young man, his face obscured by shadow, standing before a weathered tombstone. The image was haunting, almost as if the figure was staring directly at me through the photograph. The inscription on the headstone was chillingly familiar: Jeremiah Thornhill, 1888 to 1904. The date suggested a life cut tragically short, and the name echoed in my mind, filling me with an inexplicable dread. I looked around nervously, half expecting to see the young man from the photograph materialize out of the fog. The air felt heavy, laden with secrets and unanswered questions. The hearse, having delivered its mysterious cargo, slowly disappeared back into the fog, leaving me alone with the photograph and a growing sense of unease. I stood there holding the photograph, deep in thought. Who was Jeremiah Thornhill, and why had he been brought to my doorstep? The answers, I feared, lay buried in the past, waiting to be unearthed. Word spread quickly about the mysterious hearse and its intended cargo. The whispers began as soon as the hearse was spotted, its dark silhouette cutting through the fog like a knife. It was as if the very air carried the weight of the secrets it held. Townsfolk, their faces etched with a mixture of curiosity and unease, gathered outside my funeral home. They spoke in hushed tones, their voices barely rising above the eerie silence that had settled over the town. Each person seemed to have their own theory about the hearse and its ominous presence. Whispers, like the rustling of dead leaves, filled the air. It was as if the wind itself carried the voices of the past, echoing through the streets and into the hearts of the townsfolk. The whispers seemed to grow louder as the night wore on, feeding the fear that had taken root in the community. Jeremiah Thornhill. Wasn't he the one they say drowned in the old quarry? The name sent a shiver down my spine, and I could see the same reaction mirrored in the faces of those around me. The quarry had always been a place of dark legends and tragic tales, and Jeremiah's story was one of the most haunting. Old Man Hemlock rasped, his cloudy eyes wide with fear. His voice trembled as he spoke, each word dripping with dread. "I remember the night it happened," he said, his gaze distant as if he were reliving the moment. "The screams, the water. It was like the quarry itself was alive." "Cursed family, the Thornhills," another voice chimed in, sending shivers down my spine. The Thornhills had always been a subject of dark fascination in the town, their history marred by tragedy and whispers of a curse that seemed to follow them through generations. Best not to meddle in their affairs. The warning was clear, and it was one that had been passed down through the years. The Thornhills were not to be trifled with, and those who did often found themselves facing dire consequences. I tried to shake off their superstitious ramblings. It was hard to ignore the fear in their eyes, but I reminded myself that this was the 21st century. Superstitions and old wives' tales had no place in the modern world, or so I tried to convince myself. This was the 21st century, not some Gothic novel. My funeral home was equipped with the latest technology, a stark contrast to the old-world charm of the town. Yet the atmosphere that night felt like something out of a different era, a time when the line between the living and the dead was much thinner. Yet the photograph, the name, the palpable fear in the air, it all coalesced into a knot of dread in the pit of my stomach. It was as if the past had come back to haunt us, and no amount of modernity could dispel the shadows that had crept into our lives. The hearse, the whispers, the fear, they were all pieces of a puzzle that I was not sure I wanted to solve. As dusk painted the sky in hues of blood orange and bruised purple, a stranger arrived. Tall and slender, with piercing green eyes and an air of quiet desperation, she introduced herself as Eleanor Vance. Jeremiah Thornhill was my great-uncle, she explained, her voice trembling slightly. I received word that his remains had been found and were being transported here. I showed her the photograph. A flicker of recognition, then a profound sadness washed over her face. "That's him," she whispered, clutching a silver locket that hung from her neck. "Please, sir, you must help me. Something is terribly wrong." Eleanor revealed the chilling tale passed down through generations of her family. Jeremiah, she explained, had stumbled upon a dark secret hidden beneath the town, a secret that cost him his life. According to family law, Jeremiah had discovered an ancient ritual chamber in the depths of the old quarry. There he witnessed townsfolk engaging in unspeakable acts, sacrificing innocent lives to appease a malevolent entity dwelling in the darkness. Horrified, Jeremiah vowed to expose them, but he never got the chance. They silenced him, staging his death as an accidental drowning. Section 5. Unearthing the Truth. Driven by a sense of duty and a growing unease, I agreed to help Eleanor. We needed to uncover the truth behind Jeremiah's death and the secrets buried beneath our seemingly peaceful town. Armed with a lantern and a growing sense of dread, we ventured into the abandoned quarry. The air grew heavy, thick with the stench of decay and the weight of unspeakable horrors. As we descended deeper, the silence was broken only by the dripping of water, each drop echoing like a death knell. We finally found it, a hidden passage concealed behind a wall of crumbling stone. This had to be the entrance to the ritual chamber. Section 6. The Ritual Chamber. The air inside the chamber was thick with the cloying scent of incense and something else, something ancient and evil. The flickering light of our lantern danced across the walls, revealing grotesque symbols and chilling murals depicting sacrifices and dark pacts. In the center of the chamber stood a stone altar, stained a horrifying crimson. Chains hung from the ceiling, their iron links rusted with age, and something else that looked disturbingly like blood. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes, wide with horror, darted around the chamber, taking in the gruesome tableau. Section 7. The Pact. As we examined the chamber, we stumbled upon a hidden alcove. Inside, we found a dusty tome bound in human skin. Its pages, filled with spidery handwriting, spoke of a pact made between the town's founders and an entity of immense power. The entity promised prosperity and protection in exchange for a gruesome price, a yearly sacrifice. The pact, the book warned, could never be broken. The truth slammed into me like a physical blow. The hearse, the photograph, the chilling stories, it all pointed to one horrifying conclusion. The town was preparing for its annual sacrifice, and Jeremiah's body was meant to be a diversion. Section 8, facing the horror. We had to stop them. We raced back to town, the weight of the town's dark secret heavy on our shoulders. As we burst into the town square, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. Their eyes, cold and lifeless, turned towards us. Standing before the assembled townsfolk, bathed in the eerie glow of the streetlights, was the gaunt driver of the hearse. In his hands he held a gleaming ceremonial dagger. And then I saw her, a young woman, her eyes wide with terror, bound and gagged, being dragged towards the centre of the makeshift altar. They had chosen their victim. Section 9. Trapped. The townsfolk, their faces twisted in a grotesque mockery of smiles, began to chant in an ancient guttural language. The air crackled with an unseen energy, the ground vibrating beneath our feet. We were too late. The ritual had begun. The driver raised the dagger, its point reflecting the cold, unforgiving light of the moon. The young woman's screams were cut short as the dagger plunged down. Panic welled up inside me, threatening to consume me. We were trapped, outnumbered, with no way out. The entity, sensing our presence, began to manifest, its form shifting and swirling in the shadows. Section 10. The Final Sacrifice. As the entity drew closer, its form solidifying into something monstrous and inhuman, I knew there was only one thing left to do. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to stretch and twist around me, as if the very darkness was alive and hungry. It was time to end the cycle of sacrifice, even if it meant the ultimate price. I could feel the weight of countless lives pressing down on me, the hopes and fears of those who had come before, all resting on my shoulders. I lunged forward, pushing the driver aside as the entity prepared to claim its latest victim. The look of shock and confusion on his face was fleeting, replaced by a grim understanding of what was about to happen. The dagger clattered to the ground, landing at my feet. Its blade gleamed with an eerie light, as if it too was aware of the gravity of the moment. Looking into the entity's cold, malevolent eyes, I knew what I had to do. There was no turning back now. The fate of the town, and perhaps even the world, depended on my actions in these final moments. With a final, desperate prayer, I plunged the dagger into my own heart. Pain exploded through my chest, but I held firm, knowing that this was the only way to end the nightmare. The entity let out an ear-splitting shriek as a surge of energy erupted from my body, engulfing the chamber in blinding light. Then, silence. The oppressive darkness that had once filled the room was gone, replaced by a serene, almost holy light. I had become the final sacrifice, my death breaking the ancient pact. The power that had held the town in its grip for so long was shattered, and I could feel the curse lifting, like a heavy fog dissipating in the morning sun. The town was free from the curse, but at a terrible cost. My life was the price paid for their freedom, and as I faded into the light, I hoped that my sacrifice would be remembered, that the peace I had bought with my life would endure.